Let me save you some time right at the start here. No, it's not going to be a 10 out of 10, and if that's in any way surprising or upsetting to you, then when you're done scream crying into your pillow, for the love of God, please go find the most grass ever and touch all of it. Tuesday afternoon. I'm recording a review for The Batman, a movie about the Batman, starring the Batman, narrated by the Batman, who talks like this, like the Batman, because he's the Batman, and this is how he decided the Batman talks, especially to himself, inside his own head, or while transcribing a journal, over a slow pull-in of downtown streets at night, to describe how bad the city is, and how the bad guys are all afraid of the Batman, which is who he is, the Batman. Is this narration voice pissing you off? When it started up first thing right away, did you immediately think, oh no, is he gonna do this the whole fucking time? Like, am I gonna have to sit here for however long this thing takes and listen to someone drag out a narration gimmick that was deliberate anachronism when Watchmen did it? That everything from Lego Batman to how it should have ended to the Watchmen series is mocked into oblivion. By now, they've seriously just unironically quit. Oh shit, he's really still going, huh? They're really seriously committing to this for all of the Batman. But I'm not, because it's murder on my vocals, and I imagine you get the point. Yes, Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne really does start out the Batman doing what you can really only call Rorschach narration in this context, and I really immediately did sink down in my chair thinking, oh no, is there really gonna do this the entire time? But, well, it is a choice. What's even more a choice is that he stops doing it for long stretches of this long movie, so every time he starts up again, you get the, oh, right, yeah, they were doing this surprise feeling all over again. That's not to say that it's 100% a bad idea or doesn't work at all in this or that context, but as is the case with almost every other notably good or notably less good thing about the Batman, it makes me more curious to know at what point in the extremely lengthy process of reconceiving, retooling, rewriting, recasting, redirectoring, reuniversing, and apparently reshooting this thing, that this particular idea dropped into the process. The Batman may not be an epic superhero feature in terms of scale, save for some increasingly out of place and not great-looking big action set pieces for the most part that feel bolted on and stretched out to remind everyone which genre this is technically supposed to be, but it's a very, very long and even longer feeling one, stuffed with thinly drawn but colorfully performed characters playing out subplots within subplots in a detective story that's working overtime at being situationally complicated to compensate for not actually working as a proper mystery thriller. Nearly all of its narrative components run functionally in isolation, but joined together, they don't so much flow as fit together because they have to. I stopped trying to figure out what kind of act structure I was dealing with after Natural Ending number 4. It's kind of got a 14-act structure, maybe, and it wasn't until the third instance of what ought to have been a transformative character journey plot point resolving itself a scene or even a couple minutes later that I pinpointed the familiarity I was feeling. They're calling this a movie, and I'm sure they wrote it as one, but what Warner Brothers has released as The Batman feels more like a 4 or 5 episode HBO Max show streaming all at once, and binge was not the proper format for this story. As to the content of said story, in lieu of jumping back to another origin, this time we're skipping Batman Begins and jumping directly into its more or less and even more grounded and gritty realism do-over of The Dark Knight, where Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne is already on year 2 of his crime-fighting mission when a serial killer calling himself the Riddler starts leaving notes specifically for the Batman behind at crime scenes as he not John Does his way through a who's who of Gotham City political and underworld elite, which, wouldn't you know it,
Message!
turn out to be one and the same. Allying himself with Zoe Kravitz cat burglar with secrets, Selena Kyle, he attempts to get the head of the killings by figuring out connections to John Turturro and Colin Farrell as mobsters Carmine Falcone and the Penguin, but then faces the realization that he may actually be out of his depth, i.e. his detective skills aren't actually that great yet, and his privilege may have come with too many blind spots, which means things go south fast when Riddler targets Bruce Wayne, the legacy of the Wayne family themselves, and look, if you know your Batman stuff, they're basically doing Hush crossed with Long Halloween, but without all the other villains and most of the comic bookish stuff scrubbed out, so, figure it out. Thematically, this is all pretty solid stuff, honestly, for all these still ultimately pretty justified worry that this was going to be yet another exhausting retread of the grim specter of justice Batman the films have been churning out for decades now. It's mildly refreshing to realize director Matt Reeves is effectively signed on for an interrogate and deconstruct production where, to the extent that such a disjointed film could be said to have an arc, it bends in the direction of breaking down a lot of the most tiresome and troubling things about the property, turning Batman gets called out for being a rich guy who says he's a detective but mostly just beats up the underprivileged into the the point it's aiming for. I mean, let me be very clear about this. I do not expect that it will go unnoticed by those most apt to be enraged by such things, that this version of Catwoman specifically name-checks white privilege among Gotham's incurable psychic cancers, and I can tell you firsthand that a Batman movie looking to conceive a 2020s vision of realistic evil incarnate and landing on edgelord conspiracy streamers with guns is so guaranteed to invite a horrifying response toward a studio that's frankly no stranger to targeted harassment when it comes to this genre. I kinda have to respect it, yeah. I just wish I could respect it while also saying it actually worked all the way through, but like most of the other good things in here, and to be clear, there's a lot of good, the score works, Pattinson and Kravitz are both terrific, set aside any doubts you might have had that they can't hack the action scenes, it looks very handsome, even if the too cute by half scene you remember from Seven or Zodiac, but now the Batman is there aesthetic starts to get old fast. Farrell all but vanishes into the Penguin, and while there's some notable stretch to the superfluous action where you can almost hear the producers going, you just did 20 minutes of drama, so this car chase better be epic, yeah, there's some good stuff in there too. The main recurring problem is you can see both the points the Batman is aiming for and the ways in which those points could be racked up into something great, but you can also see it get pulled back down instead by the nature of its own existence. See, it's almost thrilling to watch a version of this chase the billionaire vigilante fantasy thing is kind of gross and retrograde as a concept, and Bruce Wayne would be a terrible person in real life business further than most other versions of this character thread ever go, but that just makes it ring more hollow when it has to eventually Deus Ex utility belt away to go, yeah, but, and get out of that same narrative because the organic ending, i.e., you're right, this whole idea was insane. I'm going to therapy. Alfred, start giving this money to the poor. Jim, defund yourself because you should not have let me keep getting away with this. It means you can't make the Batman 2, 3, 4, whatever, and you can't do that. Or rather, you can. I mean, you meaning Warner Brothers specifically decoupled this series from the rest of the continuity so you can do whatever you want with it, so you can do that. You just didn't want to, apparently. And that reach extending the will of the grasp ends up being an endemic weakness to the whole rest of the enterprise. The people playing the politicians and gangsters are doing such a good spin on the realistic movie version of their characters, it can't help but feel like unintentional bad comedy whenever the dialogue has to flip back around to what we recognize as goofy cartoon bullshit about Gotham City, Arkham Asylum, the Riddler. When 95% of the scenes are so committed to grounded, gritty reality, it makes it more ridiculous when Pattinson and Kravitz ragdoll off the sides of buildings or bounce back after fighting off whole armies of professional thugs not permanently crippled. The police procedural stuff is so ordinary and mostly sensible that I couldn't not get yanked right out of the story at a pivotal moment when a perfect okay, take the stupid mask off chance present itself, and none of the cops do that because they don't. And yeah, people, including me, look past bigger logic leaps and other stuff in this genre all the time, but you know, that's usually because there's a talking shark or a wizard or something, so you know you're not supposed to take the world seriously. It's not standing there pretending to be the Godfather this whole time, except for when it needs to justify a merchandisable plot point. And I'm not trying to be down on this. If anything, the Batman is better than I thought it was going to be based on its, well, that didn't work, so here's Christopher Nolan version again, but through a red filter marketing campaign. But I did struggle to keep my interest intact, and while I appreciate what it's going for, especially on the thematic side, I understand that the target audience here is teenagers who've never watched the actual neo-noir crime thrillers this is referencing and will be blown away by how grim and portentous everything is. Fine, okay. But reheated dress-up leftovers is still reheated dressed-up leftovers, and it just feels kind of depressing if after all this time, this is really all we can think to do with this material over and over again. 6 out of 10, not that it matters, everyone is seeing it anyway, but I wish it was better. Or different. Or both.